Welcome to a live edition of the Beaver Banter podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner, joined by my co-host Ian Rivers. We are here at the Division II Selection Show watch party for Bemidji State football, and Ian, a big day for the Beavers. There was a slight back of the mind worry that they weren't going to get in, but we were pretty confident that Bemidji State football was once again going to get into the NCAA tournament for the third year in a row, and they did. And why don't you tell them who they drew?
Yes, we drew a first-round matchup. We'll be headed to Texas to take on the University of Texas Permian Basin. We don't know much about, I believe it's the Falcons as of yet, but we'll do a little research and we'll get back to you later in the week on.
We're still working out on the names.
Yeah, just a little bit more about that matchup. But the Beavers are in. They did enough this season, regardless of the result yesterday in Augustana, which was, of course, not what they wanted. But either way, they're in, and that's all that matters. Now it's win or go home, and that's, I think, something that we've become used to with this team, like you said.
Yeah,
I mean, in the playoffs.
They're back in, and it was, we just had a few coaches walk past, and they were talking with us, and they were saying, did you think that we were going to Augie? Did you think that we were going to play Texas? And it was kind of up in the air. I had this gut suspicion that it was going to be Augie because of travel reasons and just the way that things are drawn up for that reason. But Ian, why don't you explain, because we were talking about this a little bit before the show, why Bemidji State is going all the way down to Texas for the first round matchup, despite the fact that travel is kind of a factor in these first round matchups.
So the main reason is because I believe Mankato is to Sioux Falls than Bemidji is. And so that unfortunately draws the Beavers all the way down to Texas. And then, of course, I believe it's Western Colorado that will be hosting Central Washington. So, yeah, travel is the main thing in the first round. Of course, the 1 seed gets a bye, and the next 3 teams are ranked. And then everybody else after that is just headed to the most convenient travel destination for that region. And, of course, that means that the Beavers will be headed to Texas. But that's fine. We get to play a warm weather game, and I'm sure that nobody's going to be too upset about the climate, unless it, I guess we haven't looked at the forecast, but it should be nicer than up here.
Ideally, you'd hope that, it's at least like maybe a 50-some degree day, and it's a little bit better for that passing attack that Bemidji State wants to do. They get into the tournament. They had a loss yesterday against Augustana that kind of put things a little bit in the air. They could have won the NSIC. They could have had a chance for a home playoff game. They don't get that, but they still get into the tournament. There are 3 schools from the NSIC that got into the tournament, and Augustana and Mankato are going to play each other in Augie on Saturday. And just looking at this section, we are kind of saying, they don't get to go to Augustana. They don't get to play the closer game. They have to go all the way down to Texas, the team that they're not familiar with. I don't have the stat sheet in front of me, but these 2 teams have probably never played each other before. So for those 2 teams to kind of get into this matchup, it's still better because in the sense of they don't have to go play Colorado School of the Mines if they can win that first round matchup and play the number 1 seed in this district.
Yeah, and I mean, the Beavers aren't going to shy away from any competition that they get in this postseason, but I think that's a little bit of a silver lining in this matchup, is that you're on the bottom side of the bracket and you get to avoid a potential second round matchup with a team that is, they just said, hey, they won 82-0 last weekend. So that's a team that's going to be tough. So you want to maybe put them off as long as you can, get some momentum in the playoffs here. And then if you got to play them in the third round, in the quarterfinals, I believe that would be, so be it. But yeah. I mean, I think it's a fair first round draw. And I think that the Beavers have shown this year that they can compete with anybody, even as if you just look at the score line from yesterday's game against Augustana, it's not that pretty, but the Beavers were in that game late. And I think that they can be in any game late this season. So I'm not super concerned about the matchup. We'll dive into it a little bit more. And then, like we said, later this week, we'll give you a more in-depth rundown on what that might look like. But
yeah, and the thing with Bemidji State is they ended up losing that game to Augustana yesterday, and it was tough because they had the chance to win the NSIC, and it's a game where you felt like they just got down early, and like we talked about last season, that's kind of the games where if they get up 2 scores early like they did against UMD, I know that their offense can score and they have the ability to with the quick strike ability, with the things Alt can do, but also any football team getting down 2 scores early is going to put them in a tough position. And it happened against Augie, but they're able to kind of come back, try and make it a little bit of a game there. But I mean, this is going to be kind of the key for Bemidji State going forward, is can that offense come out early? Can they get a score on the board? And especially going down on the road, getting that score early, kind of getting the jitters out of the way. But this is a team that's played in the playoffs before, and they've only won. They've never lost in the first round of the playoffs since Bemidji State has been a program. So this is a team that does at least win those games, and we're gonna have to see kind of how that transpires. But just kind of, I know we don't have a ton of time to like quickly dive into the Augustana game, but Ian, quickly, just kind of what did you see? I know you were up here in Bemidji and you were watching a little bit of it yesterday.
Yeah, I think it was just a really good team that you ran into, and it became, an issue when offense was a little sloppy in the first half. The defense did what they needed to do to keep you in the game, and then the offense picked it up in the second half. And,
unreal play by Del Duncan
Busby. Get that man on Sports Center for that catch.
Seriously,
that was incredible. Opening the second half with a 75-yard touchdown grab, and then the defense allows the answer pretty quickly. But the offenses really both picked it up in the second half, and it was just the Beavers could get there, and then they just. Augustana was just too good. They just, every time we tried to make that push, they said, no, not this time. And it was unfortunate that we couldn't get it done, but maybe this is the little spark that you need going into the tournament. Maybe if you win that game, no, that's probably not true. You're probably going in on a high, winning the conference championship, but now there's a little bit of a chip on the shoulder, watching that selection show. A lot of disrespect thrown to Bemidji State's way towards the end there, compared to the other teams in the region, at least. So I think this is a good matchup. And I think that, senior quarterback, sixth-year quarterback, whatever Brandon Alt is, he's got plenty of experience in these situations. And so do a lot of these upperclassmen. And, even the younger guys, they know what the standard is here. And I think that they have just as good a shot as anybody in this country to go out and win this game.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing with that is they're a team that's played a lot of these games. They just know. They went down to Texas last year to play Angelo State. So that trip shouldn't really phase them going down there to do that. And looking at kind of the things that this team can do really well, the defense, has come along, and they've been a very kind of durable and a kind of unit that, hey, Bolte, can you give us a couple minutes here? All right. We're kind of running a little impromptu here on the Beaver Banter podcast on our live stream. We're being joined by Bemidji State University head coach Brent Bolte. And Coach, first time having you on the podcast. First of all, congratulations on a great regular season. You guys get into the NCAA tournament for the third straight year. Just kind of what's the feeling been like as you have the watch party with your team?
Yeah, we sure would have been announced a little bit quicker. We get a little bit nerve-wracking when your last team announced getting in. But we got a deserving team. They're experienced and excited to get back to the postseason and turn the page after last weekend, which was a frustrating way to, go out to the end of the season. But a lot of great leadership, a lot of good players, and just excited to get back down to Texas and give ourselves a chance to make a run in the postseason.
What do you know about Texas Permian Basin? Have you been able to kind of do a little bit of a deep dive on them? Just kind of what's the quick scouting report on them?
You know what? I haven't done anything. So our staff obviously is diving into it more than I have. I'm just trying to figure out logistics of, how to get down there and figure out who they are. But obviously you can look at the national rankings and you know how good they've been on offense, how good they've been, especially in the back half of the season. But obviously winning the Lone Star Conference, one of the best ones in D2, that says a lot about their program. Young coach, got those guys believing, give them a lot of credit. Like, they think they were picked 7th in their conference going into it, and played really, really well and played a tough game against Western Colorado early in the year, which they dropped, but it was close. So I think if that would have been flipped and they won that game, there'd have been some hard talk with, where they'd have been ranked regionally, probably still behind Mines, but pretty great resume on their behalf. So obviously you got good players, good coaches, good scheme. That's kind of the name of the game when you make the national playoffs.
And, with your team and your team that's been going 3 years in a row now, you made the trip down to Texas last year. Just kind of feel like the way that you go about this has just been, I don't want to say professional because you guys have been good through this process, but you guys just kind of been through it before. Like there's just a calmness when going about it.
Yeah. I mean, experience, obviously going through things helps out. I mean, you look back at the first time that it's all new when you played Mines. It's the first time getting on a charter plane through the NCAA and going out there, playing a great team, L2, just everything was new. And we have a lot of those guys who are sitting in the room that still played in that game. Then getting the experience last year of going down and doing it again for the vast majority of the guys that are, playing right now made that trip. So it just, again, there's some normalcy to it. I put it that way. So, I think our guys will handle that side of stuff and the travel and everything else. And then all it comes down to at the end of the day, it's a game, right? We just got to go play loose and play fast. And that's when I think Bemidji State plays at its best. So we're going to take the underdog mentality, which we are on a piece of paper, and run with it and see where the chips lie as we get through Saturday.
What have you liked about your defense kind of through the last few weeks of the season and all season long, really? They've just kind of been constantly producing for you guys. What do you like about that unit?
I mean, they're just, again, extremely veteran. I think our D line has played well the whole year. Marcus Hansis had a phenomenal year. Marco Cavallero, Stephen Hoffman, Cade Barrett, and even some of the back. I mean, we're rolling 10 guys on the defensive line, pretty consistent. So when you're able to do that, you keep guys healthy. I think our backing core, obviously, a bunch of 6-year guys, a lot of guys that played in the back half. So a lot of game experience. Nothing really phases them as you get more creative offenses. Still doesn't mean we make all the plays, but definitely a sense of calm as things go. And you got to roll with the punches when you get in the games. Like every game, if you get behind or things aren't going your way, you got to be able to make some adjustments. So I think those guys being through it so many times helps us with a lot of that upperclassmen leadership.
Ian, you got any questions? Or I got one more for Bolte here.
Well, I think you got most of them out of the way. We were kind of expecting Augustana and going to Sioux Falls for that rematch a little bit. Is there any bit of excitement that you get to travel back to Texas, maybe play in a little bit of a warmer climate, or how did that kind of? Did you expect Augustana?
I think the national committee probably looks at things and probably tries not to have you play back-to-back opponents, as you go through it. So I didn't really think that we were going to play Augustana after I took a deep breath last night and was looking through things on the way back. But it could have been, and to be honest with you, that would have been perfectly fine too, and have a rematch of a game that we obviously wish we had another opportunity to play, and hopefully we do later on. But it's just nice getting out of the region and getting out of our conference. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to go play somebody else in a different conference, just to see where we stack up, guys. Like that's the whole point of playing in a national tournament, is to go out and see where you stack up nationally. So that's the fun part of this opportunity for us, in my opinion.
Last question, then we'll let you get out of here. The team, obviously not the way you want to end the regular season in Augustana, but, is it kind of throughout this week, kind of give everybody that chip on their shoulder of, you heard it on the team. They're wondering if you guys were going to get in. Does that give you guys a chip on your shoulder of saying, we want to go out and prove people that we do belong here? Or is it just, hey, we're just going to play one more game?
Hey, Bemidji State's always got a chip on their shoulder as we go through it. We embrace the grind the axe, and living up here in the Northland, that's what we're all about. And so we're not going to back down. We're going to freaking go down to Texas and throw everything that we can at those guys, and let the chips fall where they may. You're going to have two great teams, a lot of talent. Somebody's going to have to go out and make plays. So that's the end of the day. And I think, again, we play our best when we're just calm, cool, collective, and kind of play the game like a bunch of kids on the backyard. So that's going to be our philosophy, and try to get some pressure on that the opponent who, obviously believe their first time getting in, or and so that would be what we'll try to do, but not necessarily the easiest thing being done. But they're well deserving of it. UTPB. You look at what they've been able to develop with the rosters, the transfers they've been able to get in. They obviously have a great group of dudes down there and great coaches. So give them a lot of credit. It's going to be a daunting challenge, but we're going to go down there and give it our best.
Hey, Coach Bolte, thanks for the time. Appreciate you coming on the podcast, and we hope to talk to you next time and sometime later on when we can celebrate some playoff wins.
All right, guys. Thank you.
All right, that's Coach Bolte joining the Beaver Banter podcast for the very first time. Ian, anything you kind of took away from that interview? We appreciate Coach Bolte giving us the time here as he's kind of been making the rounds with some media, getting ready in this selection show. The thing that I found the most interesting was him talking about the selection and saying, I took a deep breath and kind of realized that, no, we're probably are going to end up going down to Texas. And anything else kind of catch your mind when hearing Coach Bolte talk?
Well, I think just a little justified in what I said earlier about this team, their mentality. They don't back down from a challenge, even if there was 8 teams in this tournament and we had to go to Colorado to play the Mines in the first week. We're not going to back down from that challenge. We're not going to roll over in the first minute and just give up. That's the mentality that this team carries. It's a small community and nestled up here in the Northwoods. There's not much, that's just that's how the team operates. And I think it's really exciting to hear him say that. And I think the team, they absolutely do operate like that. And I'm excited to see what this team can do down in Texas.
Yeah, I think overall, when, like he said, we always have a chip on our shoulder. We're always trying to play those games. And that's kind of what you have to do, being from a school up in Bemidji State. And every single time you get called Bemidji, anytime you kind of get put in that national spotlight, I think you kind of do have to have that chip on your shoulder and kind of and do go about things that way. But overall, with like he talked about, they're a team that's kind of newer. They're a team that was not picked to finish at this point. So they have a chip on their shoulder as well, trying to prove that they're in terms of Texas Permian Basin, they're trying to prove that they're belong down here. And for them to get a home playoff game, that's going to be a good atmosphere that they're going to have down there. And it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun football game for Bemidji State as they go down on Saturday. I don't think the game time has been announced quite yet, but
I don't believe so.
I mean, I'm sure there is something out there, and we'll look that up here as the broadcast goes on. But again, we're doing the Beaver Banter podcast live from Bemidji State, the Division II selection show announced here, and Bemidji State playing the Texas Permian Basin in the first round. And if they win, Ian, then it kind of sets up a potential rematch with Augustana or Minnesota State. The two losses for Bemidji State the last 2 seasons in the regular season has been those two schools. And when you look at this game, we talked about it a little bit before we got Coach Bolte on the program here, but this has been a team that if they can get up early and they can kind of play their game, which is, and part of it is just the teams that they're playing. When they play like a UMD, they got up 14-0 early. Not only did that help out just getting up 2 touchdowns, but UMD is a power running team. And to make them kind of have to lean away from that because you get up early is huge. And when you play a team like Augustana that can run the football and they get up early, that you kind of play into their hand. And obviously, their Bemidji State got themselves back into that game. There was a chance for them at the end, towards the end of that ball game. And it's just kind of the things that, if there is anything that could kind of halt this train, it would be the turnovers. And it's just kind of the thing on offense of things just not quite clicking to get that to work. But also when this offense clicks, they can go right down the field and they can do a lot of things. So also they played a good team in Augustana. So it's not to say that, this isn't a slight against the BSU offense. It's to say that sometimes you play some of those good teams and you sometimes can run into that and turnovers are fluky. We've talked about this all the time in regards to defense. Like, it's good that defenses get turnovers. Sometimes turnovers are just the wide receiver dropped ball. It bounced off the helmet. The quarterback made a misread. Like, it's just you taking advantage of a situation that you don't have any control over. And in offense, it can kind of be the same way. McGath with the fumble at the goal line yesterday, it's kind of just a bad snap. Like, those happen. But they're also fluky because you could say all week we're going to work on ball handling, but that doesn't necessarily. I like the Vikings. This was the conversation with the Vikings a lot in the first month of the season. It's like, well, we're going to practice harder. And it's like, I understand that, and that's going to work. But at the end of the day, you still got to play the game. And it still just comes down to a fluky thing of your hand wasn't in the right spot at the right time or whatever. All of that is to say is, they wanted the rematch with Augustana because if you play that game again, there's a good chance Bemidji State wins that football game.
Yeah, absolutely. There is nothing that has been released so far, at least that I could find in a quick moment's notice here on the game time on what will be next Saturday. So I'm sure that that's going to be next. I mean, I don't know that the playoffs are played any other day than Saturday, but it's next Saturday.
Probably an afternoon game.
Most of them are in the afternoon. I know that last year was like 1 or 2 o'clock that we played in Texas. So expect.
And like 1 or 2 o'clock here at the Chat last year too.
Yeah. So expect the usual time that you would have to commit to watching a Beaver football game for next weekend. Yeah, I mean, it's really exciting because you were hoping that it wouldn't come down to this. I know we talked about it a little over a month ago at this point, even that, if we go 2-1 in these last 3 weeks, and we did, and that was enough to get in, and you would have liked to win that conference championship and get a home game here at the Chet. But this is just as good because I think this team has proven, like you said, the 2 losses are to playoff teams, to pretty damn good playoff teams. So, I mean, this team can compete with anybody in this country, and it's every day, any given Saturday. It's got to be the mentality going forward. You might not get to play another game at the Chet, but in the day, that was going to be a tall task either way. I think this team is built good enough. I think they can absolutely go and compete with any team in this region. And hopefully, like we said, we get an opportunity to wait a little while to play against the Colorado team, and maybe they're get a little momentum before we have to go into that matchup.
Well, and it goes to a couple things. One, the postseason win was on the road in Augustana. Not an easy place to play against a team that you've played against before that knows you, and they're able to go and do it. It goes with what Bolte talks about, the chip on the shoulder, being able to go in. You can go down to Texas and win. Like, you want to go down there, prove yourselves. You want to go down there to get a win. You want to do all that stuff, but also defense, and specifically the pass rush of Bemidji State has been the best strength on defense, been their ability to get after the quarterback. And, guys like obviously being led by Hoffman and some of the other guys on the D line, but that's something that travels. It's a cliche, but defense travels, and to have that help your team going down into Texas is going to be big. And I don't know. I just think overall with this team, I know nothing about Texas Permian Basin, but I know for a fact that Bemidji State, it's going to be a good game. It's going to be a competitive football game. And in the second round, we'll see what happens, but you can't get to the second round unless you get past the first round. And it's like you said, it stinks that there is no game at the Chet, but they still get into the tournament and they get to have their season extended a week, and they get to keep playing football, and they get to keep kind of building on what Bemidji State football has done for the last few years, and really the program. Because again, we've said this before, when we started covering Bemidji State football, me and Ian on the R&B Sports Talk radio show, they were a good football team. They were a good team that won a lot of games, but they always felt like they were just a step away. They were one win or two, one really good marquee win away from getting into a tournament and proving themselves and doing all this. And they were finally able to do that over the last few years and get into the tournament and win some games. This is a good football team. And to kind of see where that program growth has gone, we've kind of talked about it. It shows that this isn't like after this year. I know we talk about it a lot with Brandon Alt, and this team is obviously, he's a big reason why they have the success they have, but there's just everything around this team that shows that there's not really slowing down.
Yeah, I think that's one thing I took away from this team this year is that I think even after, you lose a guy like Brandon Alt, it's still going to be a sustainable run. It's not like, the quarterback's gone. Now what do we do? We're just going to be another 6-win team. I don't think that's the case. I think this team has been built so well over the last 6-7 years that I think that we can continue to sustain the success. And even if we have to find new ways to win ball games, I think we've already kind of proven that this year. It's not necessarily all been Brandon playing hero ball. There's been many various ways that this team has sustained success, and I think that we can do that going into the future. And regardless of what happens next weekend in Texas, I think that's the main thing you have to take away from this season.
Anything else that you take away from Bemidji State's the interview from Bemidji State head football coach Brent Bolte? Is there anything you take away from that interview else that we've talked about so far? Anything else that he said, or just kind of things that maybe nod your head along and agree with? What kind of you take away, if anything else, from that interview?
I think it was that's what you expect out of Bolte. I think it's his normal demeanor and the way that he approaches things. And I think you brought up a good point about the professionalism. This is kind of the baseline expectation for this team, and that's the way they're going to be approaching it. And I think it's a really good way to go about this. You can't get too high or too low in these situations. I think the team's going to be able to shake off last week's result pretty simply and move forward. Obviously they want to win that game, but I don't think that's going to necessarily affect their mentality going into this next game. Home or away, and Jordan playing a D3 state champs, it's all going to be the same mentality for this team. And I think that's the best thing that I took away from this quick little chat with Coach Bolte, giving us the time of day. Next hour, but I think it was just great to be able to be here and get to talk to the coaches a little bit, talk to the players a little, see this, D2 selection show.
Yeah, it's a cool process. It's a quick process, and we're a little, all of a sudden everybody starts, because again, business as usual. There are meetings when we got in here, and they're going over film from yesterday's game, and they're getting ready. So that way, I don't know, they come back and look film every Sunday. I don't know what the process is like. That way tomorrow when they get ready, I know tomorrow's kind of their off day or their light work day. But when it's, the Tuesday, Wednesday practices, they're ready to go and they're ready done. It'll be interesting to see what kind of the schedule is like, because you got to go down to Texas, and how early you get down. Is it worth getting down there a day or two early to acclimate yourself and to find a place to practice? Or is it, being out of your own bed for a couple days doesn't necessarily get you, is it better to kind of go down on, Friday and get ready to go, or Thursday, or is it better to go down like Tuesday? Like what, that kind of thing. But it'll be interesting to see kind of what the thing is like. And obviously you don't want to lose. And obviously Bemidji State feels like they should have won that game yesterday against Augustana, or they felt like they, were in a position to win, or they gave the game away or whatever, but it's going to be the chip on the shoulder and going to be ready to go and prove themselves. And I know that they'll say that whatever, if they would have won, they still would have had a chip on their shoulder. And I don't doubt that. But again, it just adds a little bit extra coming off a loss because you just want to prove yourself like that. I think that's what's going to help Bemidji State out the most. But as we do a little bit more checking, it's already up on the Permian Basin website. So let's see if we can get a game time here because there's a countdown for this game on their football website. So kind of a little on-air production meeting as we find out their game time. We go to their schedule. It's going to pull up for me. A 2:00 kickoff from
Odessa, Texas. All right.
Odessa.
Yeah. So this has been a little bit of a fly by the seat of your pants type of broadcast, but we knew it would be coming up here doing a show live from Hagsour Hall.
I was preparing for them to play Augustana. So
yeah, it's been chaotic. Like we said, we'll do a little bit more research. And this week when we come out with our normally scheduled episode, we'll get you a little bit more of a deep dive into the type of team, the type of offense that Permian Basin likes to run, what we can expect from the Beavers and what we can expect from, I believe it is the Falcons that we will play this week.
Looks like it. Yeah. I mean, look, we don't have, last year we had it kind of set up because we played Winona, a team we already knew a lot about. And then we also had Ryan Campo join the podcast last year to give us a little update on Angelo State, who did not make the tournament this year. Again, Angelo State's not a bad team either. And the Lone Star Conference, like Coach Bolte talked about, is one of the best in Division II. The NSIC is not a bad conference by any stretch. They're a good conference, but the Lone Star Conference is also pretty good. So that if, like Bolte talked about in the interview, if you come out of winning that conference, you can't be taken lightly. So it's gonna be a fun matchup.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been hard to gather my thoughts here. There's been so much going on, with Bemidji sports over the weekend. We'll touch on that. It's been a crazy, chaotic weekend.
Congrats to women's soccer.
Women's soccer wins a conference championship, maybe the craziest BSU men's hockey game you've ever seen. And my mind is all over the place as my Chargers are in a 38-38 shootout at the very second with the Detroit Lions. And I am tweaking.
All we do is win here.
So it's just been a chaotic day. Got a long drive home after this. But hey, this was great. It's awesome to be able to have the opportunities to do this and see the football team celebrate. And we posted on our X page, our Twitter page. If you want to go check that video out, that I think encapsulates the professionalism of this team perfectly. There wasn't huge hooting and hollering, and it was yep, we're in. And like Bolte said, we are the last team to get announced down there at the bottom of the bracket playing against the 3 seed. So that was a little stressful. But I think that you had a hunch in the back of your mind they were always going to get in. So it was cool to see those guys celebrate that and immediately get back to work and go focus on getting ready for UT Permian Basin.
The quick look at Permian Basin on the schedule there, as Ian mentioned earlier, their opening game of the season, 96-0 to begin the season against Texas College. I don't know how good they are, but 96-0 is like when Bemidji State used to play Crookston back in the day. Those scores were about the same, not pretty either. Their one loss of the season came in week 2 against Western Colorado. That was on the road. Western Colorado,
2 seed.
They're a 2 seed in this
in the central region.
In the central region,
in Super Region 4. It's not geographical necessarily, but they got the 2 seed. So that would be a potential second round matchup for the Beavers if they get past this UT team. Yeah,
exactly. And so that's they're a good team now. They squeaked out a win there. Southern Baptist 86-7 winning that game. They played West Texas A&M 140-140 in overtime. Texas A&M Kingsville, they won 29-17. At Midwestern State 21-13, they got a win. They played Eastern New Mexico 52-59, they got a win. Angelo State 28-23, beating the Rams in that one. Western Oregon, another team that's kind of popped. Western Oregon been a team that popped up, or was it Central?
Western Oregon is I believe.
I can't remember if they got into the tournament. On trying to think of their region. If
they're pretty good, but they lost that game, and they played Mankato earlier. I don't know if they would have been a tournament team or not, but
so
they were
Western,
pretty good.
They beat Western Oregon 28-16. They beat Western New Mexico 56-3, and they beat Central Washington 42-14. So this is a team that, again, they played in a tough conference in the Lone Star Conference. They're a team that can score some points. Now, the one thing is, and again, it's tough to tell with the tough conference that the Lone Star Conference is, but also this is a team that has gotten in. I mean, they've gotten into a couple shootouts over the season, which does benefit the Beavers here. a little bit. Again, haven't done a deep dive into the tape, but this is a team. Their leading rusher has 843 rushing yards on the season. Their second leading rusher, 724. Third leading rusher, 610. Their team leader in passing yards, I don't even know how you pronounce his last name. There's no vowels in here. It is HRNCIR.
Beats me, man.
Beats
and
me.
it's something that I have a benefit of the doubt. I watch a lot of European soccer, so I have a bit of a bonus on pronunciation of some of those names, and I apologize to this man. It's I cannot figure that one out.
Hernseer, I'm going to go with 2,725 passing yards on the season. Not like a ton, but also not bad either for this team. Obviously, a team that when you have a couple different rushers that have 725, you have two different rushers that have at least 725 rushing yards, a team that can run the football a little bit, and their team leader in receiving, they're a team that kind of spreads the ball out a little bit like Bemidji State. They have two leading receivers who both have 500 passing yards on the season, receiving yards, with 504 for Ben Patterson, Dion Cook, 501, Jeremiah Cooley, 484, Laquan Wells, 447. So a team like Bemidji State, no true number one wide receiver in a sense, but a team that can spread the ball around and get everybody involved and kind of, hey, when it's your day, when you're the hot hand, we're going to throw it to you a ton.
Yeah, I think that's a benefit for the team. We've talked about it all season. There's not necessarily one guy. Oh man, as my Chargers lose on a last-second field goal. Either way, the Beavers though, like we said, their wide receiver room is pretty deep, and they can go to multiple guys. I don't think you've seen one guy or the other that they're like, yeah, on third down, we're going to this guy. It's like, no, we've got plenty of guys we can spread the ball around to in that situation. And I think that's been a big benefit to the Beavers and even their running back room. And that's been that way for a while, that they've had kind of 3 or 4 guys that they lean on in that room. But that's a big benefit. Come towards the end of the game, everybody's still pretty fresh because you're not giving one guy 25 carries. So I think that's a pretty good system, and you've got a great quarterback that can spread the ball around and move the ball downfield. So I think that this is a pretty good unit, and I trust them to go into this game, and I trust the coaching staff to come up with a very good game plan against this Falcon team.
A couple last minute stats that we'll talk about here, Ian. Team's leading tackler was Hayden Kelly. He had 107 tackles, double the amount and then some of the second leading tackler, which is Jalen Rockmore, who had 51, Champ Mathis 37, Ashton Hamby 31. So Hayden Kelly going to be somebody, going to assume he's a linebacker in the situation, wears number 42. He's going to be somebody that BSU is going to need to stop, especially if they're going to want to get into that run game. And that goes the question. Do you run right at him, send your blockers at him? Do you try and run away from him? How do you go about this? It's been a Bemidji State rushing attack with Booker and Muhammad and a couple other guys sprinkled in here that's been improved from the last couple of years. That they got that 1-2 punch, and we'll kind of see what happens. Again, it's going to be an interesting game. We're still kind of trying to piece together things, but also one last thing in terms of team leaders with sacks, Dominique Varela, 4.5 sacks. Eldon Tatiana has 4 sacks. Victor Idasui, I'm assuming, has 2.5. And Courtney Massengill has 2 sacks. So, a couple guys who have some high sack totals on the season. So again, they're a team that has, like Bemidji State, a little bit here. I'm going off on a limb, just kind of box score hunting, but looks like a team that's got a good linebacker, looks like a team that has some good pass rush, and guys that can get to the ball. They don't have a lot of turnovers. They have Cayman Amao, who has 2 interceptions. Jalen Rockmore has 2 picks. Malik Allen and Sean Burns each have a pick as well. So they're not a team that relies on turnovers. They're a team that relies on their front 7 doing a lot of damage. And that gets to the point. What Bemidji State, I think, kind of had last year against Angelo State when they played them was the running game just never quite got its footing in that ball game. And you can kind of tell when they got to that third quarter, second quarter, not quite to the fourth quarter when you just pass because they were down, but it felt like you kind of had that part of your game taken away. So again, establishing the run is going to be important. But again, just for a team that feels a lot like Bemidji State, good front 7, a wide receiving core that kind of gets the ball spread around, love gets spread around. What are kind of your instant takeaways based off us, again, just kind of box score sniping here?
Well, they don't have one necessarily position group that really stands out to you as a a big threat. You don't have one net thing, but that could be a little bit of a negative too, because if you got to focus on one thing, that makes it a little bit easier to say, all right, if we don't do this, we should be in pretty good shape. And it doesn't look like there's one thing that the Beavers can just cut out of their game and necessarily say, yeah, if we do this one thing well, obviously that's turning over the ball in every game. You want to win the turnover battle. And this looks like a team, like you said, that doesn't get a lot of interceptions, but how much of that has to do with the type of team they're playing? Are there a lot of quarterbacks? Some conferences just don't have a lot of, we see teams in our conference that are very run heavy teams like Duluth. And so they're not going to throw a lot of interceptions naturally because the ball's just not in the air. But yeah, there's a lot to take away from that. And I think it's a well-rounded unit, just like Bemidji State is. And I think that makes for a good matchup.
Ian, anything else while we're here, while we talk? Again, we had Coach Bolte on the show, which was great. It was cool to get to be here and get to talk to some of these guys. And again, like you mentioned earlier, go check out our social media pages because we have some stuff on the X page. We're going to have a video on the Facebook page coming out here in a second once I get some time to upload that. But it was really cool to get to be here. We appreciate Coach Hine for giving us the friend of the podcast, for giving us the invite to come out here. And we jumped at the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. We had the time, we had the place. So that's a big thing, being able to get out here and do this. Got to see Bryce Peters, Beaver Banter legend, another 2 touchdown week. Shout out to him.
He is our top podcast downloads now, the podcast with him.
Yeah, we got to give Bryce a little credit for that, helping us out.
Add that to your resume. Can we get that on your on the BSU sports page? Like when it has your achievements
on his bio.
On your
next
bio?
year, going into next year, we want to see that in Bryce Peters' bio.
Top Beaver Banter podcast downloads. Yeah. So awesome, Bryce. Thanks for your time. By the way,
I guess if anybody beats you, we'll have to have you back on so you can try to defend your title.
And if there's anybody listening, any player, any sport, if you want to take your shot to go at him, come on the podcast.
Let us know. Absolutely.
Exactly. So, and so, no, we appreciate everybody giving us the time. We really appreciate all that the football team has kind of given us in terms of access to get to talk to some of these guys. It's been a fun team to follow. 3rd year in a row, making the NCAA tournament. It's just become standard for this team. And it's been really fun to get to follow. And we're going to have, like Ian talked about, some more podcasts coming up this week. We're going to talk about women's soccer, guys. Trust us.
Keep your ear to the ground, because that selection show might be coming out any minute now. They just won the conference tournament this afternoon. I have not seen anything. We were kind of focused on getting set up here, but that's got to be coming out. Obviously, the Beavers will be going dancing. We already knew that kind of, but it'll be where they're headed. I find it hard to believe they'll get one of those top 2 seeds, just because of the hole that they dug a little bit here in the middle part of the season. But either way, they're going back to the tournament, and not to. This is a football podcast that we're doing here, but I think that they like we talked about with the Beavers defense, that travels well. So even if the Beavers soccer team is on the road, I think they'll be able to find ways to win it. But yeah, keep your ear to the ground, because that selection show might be coming up this evening as well.
Well, and you kind of mentioned it earlier when we talked about this stuff. If we weren't, or mentioned before we started recording, if we weren't here doing this broadcast for the football team, we'd probably still be doing a live stream, me from my house and you from St. Cloud.
Absolutely.
for the women's soccer championship. So, women's soccer, trust me, we're giving you guys some love. You guys are like we post about you guys on the Twitter, and we get a ton of responses, which is awesome, and shows that, again, fall sports at Bemidji State.
They're doing well.
Not just a hockey school.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
No, and that's the frustrating part about that, is that the NSIC soccer tournament is in my backyard. It's about a half hour away from where I'm living at, and we get an invite to come up here for the football team, and obviously we're very grateful.
How do you say no to that?
How do you say no to that? But I would have been able to go to the semifinal game had I not worked on Friday, and then the championship game today, if I would not have been up here in Bemidji. So either way, super exciting time of year for the Beavers, and we're just super happy to be a part of it.
Final thoughts, Ian, because you were in Bemidji this weekend. Like you talked about, you got here yesterday to watch part of the football game. And I know we're going to talk about this in detail later in the week when we have, I think it's a good time that we have Lucas scheduled to come on the podcast later this week of Beaver territory to talk hockey. And we want to give him a full show to talk men's and women's hockey. So we're going to have 3 episodes coming out this week. So again, keep your ear to the ground on Beaver Banter stuff. Follow us on Twitter, follow us on Facebook, follow us on YouTube, follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We have tons of content coming out this week because it's a very busy time. We want to make sure we get in everything. But Ian, you got to come back up in Bemidji. You got to do some stuff. You got to go to the Sanford Center for maybe the craziest game in Bemidji State hockey history since they win D1. Their best win in 3 years. So what's this week kind of been like? What's it been like to be back up on campus and around Beaver sports?
It's been chaotic, man. I mean, this is a great weekend. I think in terms of, I mean, I don't know exactly where I would place this last game for the Beavers hockey team in terms of games that I've been at and in terms of scale, because there's been a couple of games, the Michigan Tech series back McNaughton Cup was phenomenal. And then there was, right before COVID shut us down, the Mankato series here in Bemidji. We were a game away from winning the conference title in the regular season. But this one is up there, man. I mean, it was a completely different hockey game after 35 minutes. Just a crazy atmosphere. Something I'll never forget is being able to come up here and get to that hockey game. So, and we'll touch more on that with Lucas this coming week, because you
guys will have a lot to say on that.
That was a crazy game. There was plenty of good and a little bad to talk about as well. So stay tuned for that.
We have a lot to talk about. And again, we've pretty much burnt out a lot of our football discussion. We'll maybe lightly touch on it when we wrap up volleyball season that came to an end over the weekend. The volleyball team had a great way to end the regular season.
They did.
Men's and women's basketball is getting going. They already have their first wins of the season under their belts. Hockey continues to roll. I mean, there's so much going on right now. It's a great problem for us to have of so much content, and keep following the podcast because we have so much more to come. But Ian, overall, I think we'll chalk this up as a good podcast. We got invited to a selection show. We got to see the team. We got to meet a couple guests from the Beaver Banter. We got to have Coach Bolte on, our first head coach ever on the Beaver Banter podcast. Making that appearance. So all in all, I think it's a good podcast. We appreciate everybody for listening, except for this bot account that's on our Facebook page. But besides that, we're going to block that guy. We're going to block that bozo. But outside of that, we're going to call her a pod. So Ian, any last things? Otherwise, why don't you send us home?
Hey, roll Beavs. That's about all I can say. There's plenty to come this week and next, and it's a busy time of year. So congrats to the football team getting back to the NCAA tournament, and we'll see you guys later this week. This has been Ian and CJ from the Beaver Banter podcast.